Hello, I'm Bailey Leisure, and this is my 2018 NFL season Week 2 recap as I recap some of the football games that happened during the Week 2 of the 2018 NFL season. So the first game that happened in Week 2, the Ravens versus the Bengals, this was a game that was pretty much, for the most part, dominated by the Bengals. They had a huge first half lead. The Ravens were able to creep up a little bit close, but I think the big difference in this game was the 3 touchdowns that AJ Green scored in the first half of this football game, and really a great performance by Andy Dalton throwing 4 touchdowns. They did lose Joe Mixon in this game for a couple weeks with a knee injury, but the Bengals are off to a pretty good start, starting off 2-0, and they're currently in first place of their division. Chiefs Steelers. This was a game that was just dominated by the Kansas City Chiefs, mainly Patrick Mahomes. I mean, defensively, the Steelers looked sluggish on defense. I mean, Andy Reid's kind of play calling kind of played into a factor as they were up 21-0. The Steelers were able to tie the football game up, but Patrick Mahomes had a big second half, and he was just the better quarterback coming into this game. Really surprising, and he's thrown, almost 10 touchdowns, start off the first 2 games of his first season as a full-time starter, so he was just really impressive. And the Steelers not off to a great start. I mean, they definitely are missing Le'Veon Bell. There's been a lot of on and off the field issues. It really seems like they're Mike Tomlin's kind of losing this team right now, and they gotta pick it up. And very critical game coming up next week for them. But the Chiefs off to a pretty good start, and Patrick Mahomes was the big story in this football game. Chargers Bills. The Chargers were able to have a much better game and were able to beat one of the weakest teams in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills. This was Josh Allen's first start. It looked better than Nathan Peterman, but he wasn't really impressive. Threw a couple of interceptions. This team didn't look that consistent on offense. Philip Rivers was able to play very well, even though Melvin Gordon didn't have a really good game either. But I think the key in this game was definitely Philip Rivers. Keenan Allen had a decent game. Melvin Gordon had a couple touchdowns in this game, and they were able to win this game 31-20. Eagles versus the Buccaneers. Ryan Fitzpatrick proved he was no one-week wonder, as he had another impressive game against the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles didn't look that great defensively. They looked a little bit better on offense, but I mean, Nick Foles did throw for over 300 yards, but it just wasn't. He just couldn't keep up with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who threw over 400 yards once again and threw 4 touchdowns. I mean, he's one of the key early MVP candidates in 2 weeks. Very soon, I know we can't be calling anybody MVPs, but Ryan Fitzpatrick has done what I think he could do to have that starter quarterback position when Jameis Winston's suspension is up at the end of week 3. And I said they have a winning record. Even if they lose next week, if he has another decent game against the Steelers, I'd keep him. You got to go with the hot hand in this situation, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, is the hot hand right now. So the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. Once again, this game, for the second week in a row, we had a tie. As in my opinion, I think in the offseason, we got to get rid of ties in the NFL. There just should not be ties in sports. Just not the case. Kirk Cousins, he played very well. Both quarterbacks played pretty well in this game. And Kirk Cousins, he showed that in this offense he could be successful. The key in this game was the field goal misses. Both teams had critical field goal misses, including Daniel Carlson, who got cut at the end of this game. He missed 2 critical field goals in overtime, and that was the big factor in this game and why it ended in a tie. Both teams played well, but once again, another tie, just not my cup of tea. Panthers versus the Falcons, always a big NFC South matchup, and once again, the Atlanta Falcons definitely, even without Devontae Freeman, Matt Ryan was able to have a bounce-back game. The play calling was definitely a lot better in this football game than it was in the previous game. Cam Newton played pretty well, and he even took a huge hit in this game by number 27 from the Atlanta Falcons, and which got him ejected from that game. Matt Ryan had a bounce-back game. They were able to score. He was able to throw a couple touchdowns and even ran for a touchdown. This was just a huge game This was a really good bounce back game, and these are always big critical games for the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC South, and they got another big game coming up next week against the New Orleans Saints. Colts versus the Redskins. The Colts were able to bounce back after a disappointing second half against the Cincinnati Bengals. Andrew Luck didn't have a great game, but they did just enough to win this football game. The Redskins couldn't turn back the clock this week. Alex Smith and Adrian Peterson had kind of lesser games, and the Indianapolis Colts were able to come away with the victory in this game, 21-9. So the Texans versus the Titans. Even though Deshaun Watson threw over 300 yards in this football game, and Blaine Gabbert, who started this football game, even though they had Marcus Mariota active, he started this game, didn't look that sluggish, and it just, somehow the Titans won. And you look at the statistics and how they won, they just didn't manage the clock well in this game, and it was just kind of a surprise game, and the Texans are off to a bit of a rough start. I would have at least thought through these first two games, this game was like almost a shoo-in for them to win a game, because I think they're a better team on paper. But the Titans were able to win this football game 20-17. Browns versus the Saints. The Saints were able to come away with victory, even though the Browns had many chances to win this football game. They missed a couple field goals by Zane Gonzalez, who was dealing with a groin injury, and he was just cut. My biggest, the missed field goals and the missed extra points cost them, especially when they scored a touchdown to give them the lead within 2 minutes, and had a chance to tie it, kick a 52-yard field goal, and get it to overtime. And those were big misses. But my biggest criticism from this game was the play calling under 6 minutes. There was a critical interception Tyrod Taylor threw on a 2nd down and 2 play when you're under 6 minutes. I don't know why they called that play. I kind of criticized. That was my biggest complaint from this game, was the play calling. They could have just ran the clock out in this game, and they chose not to, and it ended up biting them, even though they had more chances to win after that. And I think that was more prominent. But just another game the Browns could have won, and they choked at the end of it. Their winless streak continues, and we'll see if they can bounce back and get the win over the Jets. So the Dolphins versus the Jets, this was kind of a kind of game. Sam Darnold looked decent, throwing over 300 yards, but he threw a couple interceptions. I think there were a couple turnovers by the Jets that is the reason why they won. Dolphins won this game, and really a surprise at the Miami Dolphins. I would have never thought they were that every Florida team right now, maybe the Jaguars, but every Florida team right now is 2-0, and the Dolphins are 2-0 after 2 weeks. We're through 2 weeks, but just a surprise that a team I expected only to win 2 games this year has already won those 2 games. So Dolphins off to a decent start, even though they didn't look that great against the Jets. So the Lions versus the 49ers. 49ers won this game by 3 points, even though the score is the 49ers kind of won that game a little bit more showing than the score actually shows. Considering they scored a lot of their points on garbage time. But Jimmy Garoppolo had a bounce-back game. Not very impressive statistics. He threw over 200 yards with a couple touchdowns. But he didn't turn the ball over, which was critical in this game. Matthew Stafford did have an impressive game, but it just wasn't enough. And Matt Patricia's kind of looked a little bit sluggish in his debut. And he's got a big test coming up next week, as he will be facing his former team that he was a defensive coordinator for years for, which is the New England Patriots on a Sunday Night Football matchup. But the 49ers, a team people expect to take that next step, was able to get a bounce-back win this week against the Cardinals versus the Rams. Everybody expected this to be a blowout, and I wasn't surprised by this result. I mean, this offense just did not look great against the way better Rams team. The Rams, they probably could have scored more points in this game, but they just ran. Sean McVay just did what he did. Jared Goff had a decent game. Todd Gurley didn't play a lot in this game. He was dealing with some cramps, but he didn't need to against the Cardinals. It was kind of like another bye week for them almost, basically. But, I mean, you got to look at the Cardinals right now. They just do not look impressive offensively, and I'm not sure if it's due to quarterback, due to offensive line play. But, I don't know Mike McCoy and Steve Wilks have just not done a good job with the offensive play calling. And I know Steve Wilks is more of a defensive coach, but they need to pick it up. I mean, only scoring 6 points in 2 games, 1 touchdown, they just do not look good at all right now. Raiders versus the Broncos, close game. The Raiders had a lead in this game late, and just Case Keenum was able to didn't have a great game, but he was able to lead that big drive and set up that game-winning field goal. And just the Raiders didn't look that impressive either in this game. And just John Gruden not off to a great start. And I think this defense definitely showing how much it could use Khalil Mack still. But just the Raiders just did not look good this week. Patriots versus the Jaguars, a rematch of the AFC Championship game. And I got to say, Blake Bortles, he looked very good in this game. And the Patriots defense, once again, just did not look that great. I think it was really impressive to me. And it was a huge game for him to show what Blake Bortles can do when he's at his best. And I think it was important for him. He threw over 377 yards, threw 4 touchdowns. He made plays with his feet, and it was really important considering he was doing this without Leonard Fournette, one of his big running backs. So if Blake Bortles is able to play like this, the defense is able to do what it can do. And Calais Campbell started this game, but he wasn't at full strength, dealing with a knee injury, and he also had an eye injury in the game. When they're firing on all cylinders, this could be the team to beat in the AFC, and the Jaguars showed why. By getting some revenge on the Patriots. Giants versus the Cowboys. I mean, neither team looked super impressive, but I think the biggest key in this game was just offensive line play and how bad it was for the Giants. I mean, Eli Manning, I think, was sacked 5 or 6 times. I mean, just Eric Flowers, he just looks like one of the worst starting offensive linemen in the NFL. He just did not look that great. And I think that was the key in this game, especially with a great running back prospect in Saquon Barkley, you got to have a good enough offensive line, and they just did. I feel like this game was won on the line in this game, and just the lines were better for the Dallas Cowboys than the Giants, and that's why they came away with the big. And then the Monday Night Football game, the Bears versus the Seahawks. I think neither team looked very impressive offensively, but the key in this game was defense. This time the Cowboys were able to seal away that victory. Khalil Mack, once again, was a critical component of this game, and he's just showing how bad of a decision it was for the Raiders to trade him. They did enough in this game to win. Allen Robinson had 10 catches. Trubisky was able to get a couple touchdowns. There was a key play to seal this victory by Prince Ubakamara, if I'm saying that correctly, sorry, to get a pick 6, which was the deciding factor in this game. The Bears were able to come away with the victory. So some news at the end of this week. There was a couple stories. There was a lot of struggling kickers in this football game. A couple kickers were cut, including Zane Gonzalez and Daniel Carlson. Dan Bailey, who was one of the top free agent kickers, he signed with the Minnesota Vikings, and hopefully this can help the Minnesota Vikings improve. It was announced Carson Wentz, he will be coming back this week against the Indianapolis Colts, and he's the quarterback of the future, and I think the Eagles are definitely going to be glad to get him back starting. And then Josh Gordon was cut on Saturday, and he was traded to the New England Patriots for currently a conditional 5th round pick from the Patriots, and also I think the trade hasn't officially happened because of a holdup with the draft pick, but Josh Gordon, I think this is a good place for him to go to, especially with all the off-the-field issues, and we'll just see how he fits well with. So, offensive player of the week goes to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, obviously throwing, 5 touchdowns. I mean, he was just really impressive. And then I think defensive player of the week, I could have gone with Khalil Mack again. There was a couple players in the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm going to go with Shaquille Griffin. He had 4 total tackles against the Bears and a couple interceptions, and he looked very impressive. And even though the Seahawks, he's one of the bright sparks on that defense right now. And that's it for my Week 2 recap. So thanks everybody for watching. Check in tomorrow for my Week 3 picks video. I recently appeared once again on the Guns N' Roses Central podcast twice, and I also did a video blog on a concert I recently went to on that channel as well. So check out all those videos. The links will be in the description below. Follow me on Twitter at BaileyLaser96. If you like the video, click like. If you like the content of my channel, please subscribe and leave your comments below on what you thought about this week's action in the NFL. So leave your comments in the comment section below. So thanks everybody for watching once again, and I will see you all later.